In the previous video, we had a look at how we can load sound files in the browser using the HTML5 audio element, but we did not really touch on the Web Audio API. I did though mention that we can load audio into the Web Audio API using the same method, and in the Web Audio API we can have much more control over our audio. But before we get into that, let's have a look at the Web Audio API. What is it really and how does it work? Well, the Web Audio API is a high-level JavaScript API for audio processing and synthesizing audio. The API makes it possible to include cool features that only were available in game engines previously, and it also lets you do some of the mixing, processing, and filtering tasks found in modern digital audio workstations, DAWs, which means that you can create interesting and professional audio web applications using JavaScript and the Web Audio API, and you can create things like games and interactive applications and make advanced synthesizers, and you can even do audio visualization. We're not going to cover everything in this tutorial, but we'll instead have a look at the fundamentals. In order to begin using the Web Audio API, we need an audio context. So what is an audio context? Well, it's a graph of audio nodes that define how audio flows from its source, which could be an audio file, to the destination, which typically is your computer's speakers. So this would be the most simple audio context. You have one source and you route it directly to the destination, which is your computer's speaker. The source can, by the way, be many different kinds of sources. It can be an audio file, it can be a synthesizer, it can be a live open microphone, whatever you want it to be. But we're going to be talking about an audio file in this video. So this is the simplest way you can set it up. But you can also have much more complicated contexts like this one, where you can have multiple incoming connections into nodes, etc. But this is not something we're going to focus on in this video. The audio context just lets us create and control all of these nodes that are in between the source and the destination. So let's try and play around with this in the browser and see what we can do with it. I have, as always, a folder. It's on my desktop. I open up that folder in Visual Studio Code. I have an index.html file, I have a main.js file, and I have a styles.css style sheet. And then I have an audio folder with some music in it. It's an MP3 file in this case. If I open the index.html, it's just some boilerplate. I'm linking to my styles.css, and I'm linking to my JavaScript right here. In my JavaScript, I don't have anything right now, and in my styles, I'm just centering everything into the center of the screen vertically and horizontally. So that's it. That's the boilerplate right here. If we go directly to our main.js, well, let's create an audio context here. We're just going to be calling it audio context. So I'm just going to put that in a constant and call it audio context. And the way we get the audio context is by just calling new audio context. New audio context. And that's basically it. Then we have our audio context stored in this constant audio context. So the audio context constructor function here is widely supported in all browsers, all newer browsers, but you might have seen somewhere else for support for older browsers, for legacy support, that it is that you actually get an audio context, something like this. I'm just going to paste this in. So that would be, you can actually get the audio context here. So you first go and look, well, do we have the WebKit audio context? If not, then we're just going to take this, and if it exists, it's going to put it into this one. Otherwise, it's not going to be there. But we don't really need to do that nowadays because it's widely supported all over the place. So now that we have our audio context here, let's see what we can do with it. Well, first of all, of course, we need some audio to put into it. So, and by the way, we only need one audio context. You don't create multiple contexts, so everything could and should be handled inside a single context. That's just a little note. But we need some sound, some audio to play around with inside this audio context. And we can go ahead and we can load that synchronously. And we're going to do that exactly as we did in the previous video. We can do it both ways. We can add to the index.html, we can add an audio element, and then we can grab that in our JavaScript by just grabbing the normal element as we usually do when we want to play around with it. But we can also go ahead and use the new audio, which I'm going to do in this case. So let's just call that audio. and that's as well going to be new audio. And inside the audio, we are going to just pass in the path of the audio file. So that's inside the audio folder, and then it's called both of us, and that's an MP3. Okay, so this is exactly like we did earlier in the previous video. So now we have that loaded. We can create a source because we have the audio context already. So we're going to use this audio context and transform this into our source. Well, actually, we're just going to make a constant and call it the source. And that is going to be set to the audio context. So we're calling a method on the audio context now here. And that method is going to be createMediaElementSource. So that's a long one, createMediaElementSource. And that's exactly what we have right here. And then we're going to pass this audio into that we just loaded here into this this method here on the audio context. And that's going to give us the source that we have right here. So now we can take this source and we can connect it to the destination, which means that we're just connecting it directly to the speakers. And also our destination is found on the audio context itself. So let's just do that. We're going to take our source and we're going to connect that because we get that as well, this method here, and we are going to connect it to our destination, which is to be found on the audio context itself. So that would be audio context and destination. And okay, so now we have actually just taken this, we have created the audio context, we have loaded our audio file and put the data into the audio constant here, and then we're creating a source from the audio context we're creating a media element source, and that's because we're creating it like this, because this could be just like a media element, as I mentioned before, inside the index HTML file that we just grabbed inside our HTML. But what we're doing here, we are just creating that from the audio here. And then we take the source and we connect that to the destination on the audio context. So let's try and open the index.html file. I'm going to right click on it and open it with Live Server, which is an extension I've installed to VS Code. And it's going to open up automatically in a browser here. And I'm not going to be able to see anything. I can have a look in the JavaScript here, and then I actually see something. I get an error message here. It says the audio context was not allowed to start. It must be resumed. Or created after a user gesture on the page. Well, we haven't really done anything yet, so we don't need to take that into consideration right now. But yes, it is true, we need to create a user interaction on the page before we are allowed to start the audio context. So let's do that. Let's add a couple of buttons here. Let's just add a button for, let's give it a class of play, and it should say play as well. I'm just going to copy this button, and then I'm going to make a pause as well, just like in the previous video. And then we can see if they show up here in our browser, and they do right here. I've zoomed in very much. Nothing happens right now. But let's go ahead and add some event listeners to these. First of all, we're just going to grab them in our JavaScript here. I am going to do that right all the way at the top, actually, before we do anything with the audio context. So that's going to be, let's call that play button, and that's going to be document. I'm just going to grab it, and then query selector, and it was called play, just like that. Then we're going to copy that line, and we're going to take the stop or pause. It's called pause, so that's going to be the pause button. Okay, now we have those, and then all the way down here at the end, I am going to add event listeners to the play button. So play btn add event listener. The event I'm going to add is a click event. So when someone clicks it, we're going to run this arrow function here, and we're going to do whatever is inside these brackets. And what we want to do, we want to take the audio and we want to play it. So I'm going to take the audio, and I'm going to run the play method on that, as we did in the previous video. Then also I'm going to do the same thing for the pause button. I'm going to add an event listener, and that is as well going to be the click event. and run whatever is here, and you probably guessed it already. Oh, that was not right. Need a space here. Okay, and that would be just audio pause. So let's see what happens now. Now we are going to save it and get back into here, and I'm gonna click play. And I click pause again. And actually, I should get an error message here. I'm not sure why I don't get it. Yeah, if I reload it, I get this one here. The audio context was not allowed to start. It must be resumed or created after a user gesture on the page. So even though I get to listen to the music right now, right here, that doesn't mean that I will have that privilege when I'm online or whatever. But yeah, so we have to check that it's actually resumed. So before we do anything, let's just have a look at the audio context here. I'm going to just all the way at the bottom here, just going to console log the audio context, just to see what that looks like. And we have it right here. So if we have a look at the audio context here, you can see that we have the state on it right here, a property called state, which right now is suspended. And what that means is that, well, it means that it's suspended, that we have to have a user interaction on the page before it gets activated. So we can check that if it is already active or if it is suspended or whatever it is. And we can go ahead inside our play right here. So before we go ahead and play anything, we're just going to check if this one is actually suspended. So I can make an if statement here, and we can check if audio context state equals, and that will be a string, and that was suspended. So what we just go ahead and do here, we just go ahead and we say audio context resume. Okay. And then I'm going to console log the audio context again after this, just to see what happens here. So right now we can see, if we look at the first one, which is this one that is being console logged, it is suspended right here. So now we're going to check if it is suspended when we click the play button, and if it is, we're going to change it, and we're going to console log another version of the audio context. So I'm going to hit play. Okay, so now I can see that if I go down here, I can see the state has been set to running. So that's just a check that you can use in order to figure out, just to activate it on a mouse click or whatever user interaction you find fit for that. So that's a way you can check for that. But there's another way. If you don't want to check for the state inside an event listener here, you can actually just start the whole audio context, if you would like that, inside an event listener or something like that. Well, or at least after a user interaction has happened on the page, on the first load. What you can do is just set a variable called audio context, and then inside here you can just set the value of that variable to the new audio context. But this one works well, but you're not going to get rid of this error right here. You will always get this error because we're actually initiating the audio context here before we do anything. But it doesn't really matter. This is not an error. This is just a warning. So, but if you don't want this yellow thing here, you can go ahead and do what I just explained. Yeah, let's move on. I'm just going to delete the console logs here because we already demonstrated what it does, so we don't have that mess. And as you saw, it also works perfectly. I can start and I can pause. And when I click play again, it'll start from the same point. So it's not going to stop and rewind to the beginning. It's just going to resume from wherever you are at the index of the whatever you're playing. So let's try to add a stop button so we can do that. I just want to show you something. Let's take this one. Let's add this one. We are going to call it stop, and this one is going to be stop. And then we're going to assume that when we click the stop button, we will rewind and we'll start from scratch again. So if we go back to our JavaScript, we can go ahead, we can grab our stop button here as well. So I'm going to call that stop button and stop. I think I did that. Yeah, class stop. Good. And then down here, I'm just going to copy this one, and we're going to add the stop button. Stop button, add a event listener. What we want to do here is actually pause the audio that we do in the pause here as well. But we want to set the time to be 0. So we want to rewind to the beginning. So first of all, we can pause this, and then we can go ahead and we can take our audio and we can set the current time to 0. And that means that it'll start from scratch. We just rewind to a 0 here. And this is, by the way, measured in seconds, not milliseconds. So let's try this out. I'm going to play. I'm going to pause, play again. Continues from the place it was at. Going to stop, going to play. So that's what it does. It starts from scratch because I rewind it. I set the current time to 0. So I can also set it to like 5. That would be 5 seconds. So whenever I hit the stop button and hit play, I'll start 5 seconds in, as you can hear. So that's basically just to demonstrate how that works. This will also work in the normal audio element things we talked about in the previous video. So you might think that we can just go ahead and we can still do all of this stuff even though we don't have the audio context and we don't have the source or anything like that, and you're absolutely right. So I can go ahead and I can comment this source out, and I can, where I connect it here, I can comment this out as well, and it will still play, it'll still work, right? But I want to prove to you that we're actually connected up to the audio context, so we can do some things with that, because you have all the methods on the audio itself where you load it up here. You have the play, you have the pause, and you have the current time, and you can do all of that stuff on the audio itself. But as we are actually connecting it, the source, we're making the source right here out of a createMediaElementSource, out of the audio. Then we can actually go ahead and use it inside the Web Audio API. And one of the things we can do is make a volume slider, a volume control or something like that. I'm not going to put any inputs in the index HTML. I'm just going to show you what we can do. What we can do here is, I am right here after the source, I'm going to make a volume constant. That is going to be a gain node, and I'm not going to get into gain nodes now. We're going to talk about that later on. I just want to show you the proof of concept that it actually works here. So I can go ahead to my audio context, and on the audio context I can create a gain. So now I have a gain node inside this volume here, and then I can go ahead and I can say volume, and the gain on this volume here, I can set the value of that to, let's try 1 first. And then nothing will happen right now. 1 means exactly the same amount of gain that was already on it. I can, it's between 0 and whatever. You can say 1.5, it'll turn it up to 50% more than whatever it was. I can go down, I can say 0.5, it'll half it. I'm just gonna try to set this to 0.2, and then we can go ahead and see if something happens here, but I don't think so. It's exactly the same volume as it was before, and that's because we haven't yet connected it. So what we have to do here is, first we want to take the source, this one here, and we want to connect that to the gain, or to the volume that we just made. So that will be connect, and we would connect that to the volume. So now we took the source and we connected that to the volume node, and then we're going to take the volume and connect that to the destination. Just like this, and then we're not going to need this one anymore, so I'm going to delete that one again. Let me just try and play it again. Now we should probably hear a different volume, and that is exactly what's happening. So that is just to prove to you that we're actually able to put on an extra node in between the source and the destination. We can try and play around with it. We can set it to half here, and then we can listen. It's a bit louder now. Let's try 1. It's louder again. We can go up and we can go crazy, 1.8 or something like that. That's not gonna sound good. It's distorted and everything, but yes, that is how it works, and that is how we can create different nodes in between this. But well, basically what we learned in this video, we talked about what the Web Audio API is and how we can use it to play sounds. And you've also learned how to load an audio file synchronously into the Web Audio API and how to create an audio context, and from that create a media element audio source node, which we then have connected to the destination of the audio context. And the last thing here I just showed you is how you can put things in between the source and the destination, just to prove to you that we're actually messing around within the Web Audio API right now. In the next video, we're going to have a look at another way to load audio files into the Web Audio API. That's done asynchronously. So yeah, see you next time.